The freedom of speech and the right to express oneself is one that many take for granted. It's a tool that helps to balance the power held by the government. But some don't see it that way. Some see it as a form of chaos to be stomped out. That we must silence the masses to protect the offending. And welcome to Honey Badger Radio. Tonight's topic is censorship, and we've got a wonderful group of stories and a wonderful group of people, as always. And as always, I'm your host, Rachel Edwards. But I'm going to...
Well, not always.
Well,
not
no,
always. Most times.
Well, not always, but at least I'm the host right now. That's all that matters.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna throw this over to Anna. Hey, Anna, how are you doing?
Doing awesome. Thank you for asking. I'm Anna Cherry. I'm a cosplayer and a professional naked girl, as well as an occasional writer. And as someone who has a tendency to take off their shirt and or pants quite frequently, I'm no stranger to censorship, as well as being an anti-feminist and non-feminist author. Thankfully, I haven't received as much criticism as I could have from that end, but it's certainly, censorship is a thing that is a thing, and we should talk about it.
We also got the wonderful Karen Strawn. How you doing, Karen?
Hi, I'm good. Can you guys hear me okay? I just switched from my earbuds to my headphones because my earbuds were pissing me off. So, but you guys can all hear me okay?
We hear you just fine.
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, good. I'm Karen Strawn. I blog at owningyourshit.blogspot.com, and my YouTube channel is Girl Writes What. And yeah, I've been talking about men's issues and masculinity. Stop it, you fucking duck! I will fucking kill you. And also, I very much value my freedom of speech and my freedom to drop F-bombs hither and yon, and also to criticize they who must be obeyed, the feminists. I very much value my freedom to do that, and so yeah, this whole topic is extremely important to me. So there you go.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karen. And I know I'm not all hosts are Rachel. Not all hosts. Yeah, all your hosts belong to me right now. Just saying. We're on the path to destruction. Make your time. But I'm going to also bring this over to Hannah Wallen. Hey, Hannah.
Hi, I'm Hannah Wallen, author of Breaking the Glasses at breakingtheglasses.blogspot.com, insufferable smartass, and experiencer of censorship. Actually, the reason that Breaking the Glasses exists is because I was censored. It wasn't government censorship, though. But yeah, I can talk about that in a bit. Back to you, Rachel.
Thank you. And finally, we're going to talk to Allison Tiemann, who is the purveyor of duck squeaks.
Well, not at the moment. Maybe in a little bit. Purveyor of duck squeaks and crystal crocs. So there you go.
There we go. Yeah.
You know what I've noticed? You know what I've noticed? Something that I've noticed is that the duck never squeaks when Allison's talking.
Interesting.
It's really, really convenient, isn't it?
It's conspiracy.
The plot thickens.
Yeah, it's a quackspiracy. And I'm at the center of it.
Maybe
and I'm okay with that.
Maybe that's what you should rename the Twitter handle for Censor Duck. The quackspiracy.
Oh no, I'm not actually Censor Duck on Twitter. That's somebody else.
Okay, well, Censor Duck will probably be listening right now, so you know what to do.
Oh yeah.
Just saying.
Right. To rename his Twitter handle to the quackspiracy?
Yeah. Let us know that you heard us.
All right, yeah. Okay, well, why don't I just, briefly, this was originally my brainchild, which is probably why it's chaotic and nonsensical and involves a lot of squeak toys and crystal cocks. So, yeah. And I also do a webcomic called Xenospora, which is adult science fiction. It's probably pretty geeky, but I don't like to admit that. Anyway, go ahead, Karen.
Always.
Far be it from me to step up on you.
It's always the cock.
Which I just did again and again. It's always the cock. Well,
always the cock with you, isn't it, Allison? Always the cock.
Well, it is rock hard all the time.
You know what was amazing? Because you sent me a copy of Xenospora, which I really, really appreciate. Thank you so much for doing that, because it's a beautifully, beautifully rendered comic. And one of the very first things I noticed was the cock. I mean, I was just kind of leafing through it. I was just flipping through, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's cock!"
Okay, well, what's really fun about that particular cock is it's like the Where's Waldo of cocks, because most people don't notice it. Like I've had parents and their 12-year-old kids, and I've said, this is adult material, and they're just leafing through, and they're oh tits, yeah, and like, did you see the subliminal cock? No, you didn't, did you?
I saw it.
I saw
it. It was the first thing
Oh,
I
it
noticed.
wasn't subliminal. It was right there in the mirror.
Yeah, but the thing is that people don't see it because it's not in your face. I mean, I'm not drawing attention to it, so it's sort of like it's just there because he's a guy and he's naked, right? It's subtle cock. It's yeah. But you and Karen picked up on it instantly. I think you, Rachel, picked up on it because we've determined that your ability to sense cock per.
Okay, so why don't we just call this the cock sense or something? I don't know.
The cock sensor?
I don't know.
No, that's you.
It's like a sixth sense, which is a cock sense, but I don't know.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes.
It might just have been like the years of being in like sexual role play communities and things like that has just turned my mind to smut, just like a goo, like a smutty goo.
So you didn't start out that way.
No
there
comment.
Was a moment.
No comment.
There was a moment in your life. There was a moment in Rachel's life that this wasn't her baseline. She was pure.
No, I actually, like I said, I'm not going to comment.
She was always
I can't
tentacle, always.
I can't speak for Rachel, but I think I can speak for Rachel when I say she was always this way.
Just some extent, but like in some ways, yes, pure, but in other ways, totally dirty. But yeah, and we'll talk about my childhood another time. But for now, we can go to the news.
No, but I actually wanted to point out one other thing. You also noticed the scrotum, which is also a subliminal body part in the second book. I was very impressed with that one.
Doesn't she sound like a fun person you guys would want to see at Calgary Expo? I think it does.
Oh my God, and now we got a sock puppet. We have a sock puppet in...
Oh God, we really shouldn't bring up the sock puppets, considering like the really messed up stuff that I wrote about Tim Schafer.
Okay, all right.
That's not a sock puppet.
It's not?
No.
It's a cock puppet?
What is it?
Not
exactly.
Wait.
Oh, wait.
Oh, it's a hand puppet. Okay, all right.
Oh, no,
okay,
I think I know what it is. It's one of those plush microbes. It's herpes.
It's herpes.
Oh, yes, that's so adorable.
It's the cutest STD ever.
I don't know. It kind of looks sad to me. Look at those eyes. They look sad.
Well, it can't be lonely.
There we go.
It's herpes.
Well, I think it looks kind of like ashamed of itself.
Well, since you guys were all, giving the listeners the cock, I thought I'd share herpes.
Well, now you've given us all
This is the
herpes.
internet. It's supposed to be virus.
All right.
Come on.
I hope that you brought enough for the rest of the class.
Enough herpes for all of us.
Yeah,
okay,
so,
I think we've adequately.
Let's go to the news, guys. Let's go to the news, please. Everybody's gonna get annoyed. All right, so getting off of all of that, we'll get into some interesting stuff. So I'm gonna be brief, but first story: Hillary Clinton guilty of wage gap. Hillary Clinton may be campaigning on an end to the wage gap, but a recent look into her Senate office employees earlier this month reveals that she is a greater offender than the average business. The female employees at her office earned 72 cents to every dollar that her male employees earned, making her a hypocrite of epic proportions. When asked why they believe that there was such a pay disparity in her office, her spokesperson said that it was not due to discrimination, but was instead caused by the different career choices that her female employees made. So it appears that when everyone else explains that women's choices are responsible for the wage gap, it's called conservative propaganda. But when Hillary Clinton does it, it's a legitimate explanation. Discuss.
Yeah, well, that's just par for the course. Obama already freaking pulled this. I mean, his wage gap in his White House staff is something like 82 cents on a man's dollar, and his representative, who was it, Jay Carney, said the exact same thing. And I think it was a Wall Street Journal reporter had the balls to call him on it and say, well, okay, so what you're saying is that you are, according to the metric that you are using to describe an injustice in wider society, you can't be held accountable for that same injustice because of this factor and this factor. So if we're not supposed to use that metric in the White House staff, why are you using that same metric to measure gender inequality and gender oppression and discrimination in wider society, right? You can't have it both ways. And of course, Jay Carney had really nothing to say about that except for bleh, 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 no comment, goodbye. And I'm sure Hillary Clinton has the same thing to say, right? Oh, it's just different. It's just different because reasons, and that's really what it amounts to. Like it. And honestly, Judgy Bitch Janet Bloomfield has pointed this out numerous times: is that high status women are often the biggest enemies of lower status women, and I think this is played out in evidence that female academics, are much less likely to cooperate with junior colleagues, particularly female junior colleagues. They're not necessarily as interested in helping other people up the ladder, particularly other women. And that when it comes to pay discrimination in academia, when it comes to hiring and pay discrimination, women are actually more likely to discriminate in hiring and in entry-level pay for women than men are. So, I mean, you look at the whole thing. It's no surprise to me that Obama's wage gap is smaller than Hillary Clinton's.
But no, we need to forget about all that, obviously, because Hillary Clinton is just a victim of the patriarchy. It's not, it's not her doing that wage discrimination. All those studies are, depending on how far you let feminism reach, even empirical evidence is evidence of the patriarchy at this point in some circles. So, I would not be surprised if they will willingly, instantly jump on the fact that, or on the idea that it's the patriarchy doing this and not Hillary Clinton, who has authored many bills and sponsored bills and has been a prominent member of government for God knows how many years, and yet they would be okay with trying to elect her to be president, to battle the patriarchy, this elusive patriarchy that keeps like a ghost assassin shifting away from no matter what new goal we achieve as a society, like that's not good enough because the patriarchy is still ever present. So I feel like, I don't know, we need, at this point, there's so much hypocrisy in the feminist circles that I don't know what we can do as a group to point that out, because like everyone can see there's hypocrisy, but they're somehow blind to it. So I don't really know. Like the studies that you, Karen, mentioned, for instance, that show plainly that women are victims, or some other things we're going to talk about today that have not women are victims, women are victimizers, that they abuse people and are very much capable of being, the bad guy. And we see that quite frequently, but somehow society has turned their blind eye to that entirely and is not reacting to any of this evidence, and in fact wants to shut it down. So we need something radical to try to bring that to awareness, I think.
Yeah, it seems like.
I think.
Oh, go on.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I think I noticed Hannah's text, so there may be some technical issues on Hannah's end.
Yeah, I just heard thunder.
Oh.
So if I disappear, it's not because I don't love you guys. It's because of the weather. It
it's really because you hate us.
doesn't take our internet down very often, but when it does, it doesn't give any warning or anything. So I would just vanish. But yeah.
Well, For everyone who was pissed off at that, that's how we roll. We just
It's a feminist
that way.
They put a thunderstorm
Yeah.
outside my door just to keep. No, I'm just kidding. But
The
this
filthy matriarchy. Oh.
but this is so typical, you know, that they'll criticize something, or they'll even make up things to criticize. That they'll explain factors and behaviors as part of the patriarchy, and oh, this is bad. There's a wage gap, and it doesn't matter if women's choices contribute to it. It's patriarchy. It's discrimination. It's an outrage. We have to do something about this, but not when we're the ones doing it, you know. And they think they're exempt because they think they're the good guys, and this just more of the ends justifying the means, and the group thinking of themselves as above everyone else and better than everyone else and more equal than everyone else, to quote one of the greats.
Well,
I
ironically,
really am not surprised.
being blind to their own faults. Like,
Yeah.
ironically, to quote Sarkeesian here, but this is something that is not true for video games, but it is true when it comes to your own personal biases, that when you believe that you're not biased, when you don't examine your own ideas or attitudes or feelings towards people ever, your instincts and other negative things will creep out and influence your choice. Like we noticed this, kind of primitive jealousy type competitiveness of in studies of women holding back other women in pay and other things. But in their own mind, they're probably seeing it as even meritocracy. They're like, well, that woman didn't do all that much stuff, and then they never examine it, and they don't look at the fact that they were actually just bigoted and biased, and they feel like they're the good guy and never actually notice their actions.
Well, if you want to feel or figure how feminists feel about meritocracy, just listen to them talk about the cool girl. And, if they cared about merit and earning your way and people giving and getting credit where it's due, and actually treating people based on how they are, what they do, and what they accomplish, and what they contribute, and so on, that instead of hating the cool girl, they would simply treat her as another individual, and would be able to accept that different people like different things. And instead, they jump on this idea that because the cool girl earns popularity, per se, in a way that they don't want to, because they don't want to work for it that way, and that's not the real people that they are, they just assume that she's fake or project that she's fake, and have to say all kinds of crap about her. And it's the same thing here in the reverse. It's this idea that it doesn't matter if there's discrimination happening, as long as the right people are doing it. It's like you have the right, instead of a meritocracy of contribution, you have a meritocracy of approved behavior. And if your behavior is the most approved, then you have the biggest exemption from meeting the standards that they lay out for everybody else.
I don't think it's behavior. I think it's rhetoric. I think it's if your rhetoric is approved.
Oh, rhetoric is a form of behavior. Everything you do, think, or say is behavior.
Well, it's a very good point, because as we saw with the progressive stacks, or I think they were called, is when they actually, the feminists are not about equality in the slightest if you look at their actual, their demands. Because as we saw with the progressive stack and what we're talking about right now, they give attention and floor time and airtime to those people who were like the most oppressed. So it's like whoever needs the most like gets the most. So it's like the exact opposite of equality. They're giving parceled out equalities that they arbitrarily predetermine to people who they choose deserve it. So it's like not equal in the slightest.
Okay, what I wanted to add, I actually think that Karen's distinction is really important, because these individuals of a certain merit will allow any kind of behavioral issues, as long as you believe that feminism saves. You can be as misogynist, as cruel to other women, or if you're a man, you can be as abusive, as sexually predatory as you like, as long as you believe, at the end of the day, that feminism saves. Then you're fine. But you can be the most pure, like you can treat men and women fantastically, equally, be equally gracious to both, and just be a great human being. But if you don't believe feminism saves, you are a sinner, and you're going to, I don't know, I don't want to say hell, but something like it. Misogyny.
There we go. Heck.
Heck. No, well, it's not the swear word. It's the
No,
I know.
concept. I
Heck
don't know.
is where darned people go. You get darned to heck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
You get
Yeah.
darned to heck.
Is that like
Or feminist
darn?
hell.
That's for the censored sinners that
Yeah.
can't get damned because that's a bad word.
I'm censoring you, Allison.
Yeah,
It has to be heck.
I know. I do have a bit of background noise because I'll be treading.
What you're saying, that pans out in a lot of other areas too. I mean, when we talked previously about the Bill Cosby thing, and I wrote about the difference in how the media treated Cosby and how the media treated, say, conservative politicians who are accused of sexual misconduct versus how the media treats liberal politicians and liberal famous people who are accused of sexual misconduct. There's a huge difference in how they get treated depending on what ideology they support and what they have done to support that ideology, or if they have done nothing.
I would agree. I think that played out in the Gian Gomeshi um, sexual assault case, which is still pending. That
Oh, gosh.
you essentially had a whole bunch of people sort of initially picking sides along political lines. So the progressives were all siding with him, and they thought he was being railroaded and falsely accused, and the conservatives were all like, he's preying on women, blah blah blah. And I was just like, I can't fucking stand the guy, right? And I think he's an egotistical progressive, ultra uber progressive, sickly, saccharine, sweet, freaking lob softball stuffed with feathers at feminists instead of interviewing them properly kind of guy, right? But he does have the right to a presumption of innocence, and he does have the right to have his case heard in court um, before the public takes a serious stand as far as whether he's guilty or not. And we don't have all the facts, and the facts aren't all going to be apparent until the trial, right? So, honestly, and I feel the same way about Bill Cosby, even though I couldn't stand the fucking Bill Cosby show, the Cosby Show. And I feel that way about a lot of men who are accused. You have to look at the individual facts of the case, and politics really don't enter into it. I mean, a man is guilty or he's not. It doesn't matter what frickin' political bent he adheres to. It doesn't matter whether he's a pro-feminist or whether he's a right-wing nut. It really doesn't fucking matter to me. Is he guilty or is he not? That's the question that I care about. But you do find people taking sides along ideological lines. But one of the interesting things that I've found about social justice warriors is that they will draw lines of ideological purity. So in some cases, like where you have truly egregious behavior like Hugo Schweitzer, you will have a lot of feminist support for them, but there will be a contingent of feminists who are just rabidly anti-Hugo, and they were for years before his meltdown, his very public meltdown and admission that he was not qualified to teach gender studies, and he only got into it in order to seduce his young hot female students. And you essentially have someone like Charles Clymer, I believe it is, who said, he talked to his therapist about it, and his therapist said, yeah, no, I don't think there's any ethical breach there in you meeting women through your feminism and then dating those women and having sexual opportunities open up to you there. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. And you have a contingent of feminists saying that that's rapey and blah, blah, blah. And I have no love for Charles Clymer, but if that was his actual deal, if he wasn't a sexual predator and he was just dating people that he met through feminism the way I would date people if I was single that I met through work, I don't see a problem with it. But you do have this sort of this extremely high test of ideological purity when it comes to certain behaviors, right? Like Brianna Wu having lunch and admitting a Gamergator is a human being and things like that. So
Yeah, that's very true. Although this is while a very interesting and valuable tangent
Yes.
is yet a tangent.
Yeah.
So, Hannah, did you have something really on topic to add, or
I
shall we
know
move on
that
to the
was
next
from
news item?
before. That was from before.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Well, I
I
can,
would say that I would add to
I
what
can-
Kira said. Feminists think anything that persuades a woman to take sexual interest in a man is rapey. So
exactly.
Yeah.
There
Yes,
you
but
go.
let's slide through the new shoot. The new
Yeah.
shoot has appeared,
Okay.
and let's slide through
Yes.
it.
Yes. We're gonna open the
Slide
new
down the
shoot. Yes. There we are. Also, I believe he wasn't a Gamergator. I believe he was actually a neutral. So that was, if I'm not mistaken.
okay, well, yeah, but he wasn't against Gamergate. He
Yeah,
wasn't
exactly.
anti.
Exactly. That's
Yeah.
okay. So, and this is going to be interesting. System for reporting microaggressions. The Ithaca College student government recently passed a bill to establish an online reporting system for microaggressions that will, quote, make Ithaca College a safer, more inclusive, and diverse community for all students, unquote. According to them, microaggressions are, quote, statements by a person made from a privileged group that belittles or isolates a member of an unprivileged group as it relates to race, class, gender, sexual orientation, ability, and more, unquote. In layman's terms, it's pretty much whatever is pissing off social justice warriors this week. While the founders of this bill express that it is not meant to be a means of levying legal charges against violators, they say that punishment for these microaggressions may become possible. However, they say it's first and foremost a means of recording these instances of microaggressions and the demographics. And to no one's surprise, they currently have no clue as to how such a system will be implemented.
Good grief.
I am horribly proud.
Microaggression reporting, a means of making the university more inclusive, is the height of personifying Newspeak. That is exactly what Newspeak is, naming something the opposite of what it actually is in order to make it sound more persuasive. There is nothing inclusive about labeling interpersonal behavior microaggression in order to create a reporting system for it, shame people over it, and possibly punish them for being human. Holy shit.
Yeah, they did say that one of the things about microaggressions is that basically there are unintended aggressions. But the thing about it is that I think that if they actually look into the demographics, they're probably going to find that really it's a bunch of, it's probably a diverse
Okay,
group
can
of
I
people.
add something?
Go on.
All right. I want to analyze this microaggression stuff. Now, I assume that one thing that they would consider a microaggression is, for the sake of argument, the cisgendered people who believe that they're the gender that everybody else, that they were assigned at birth, however you want to say that. If they believe that transgendered persons have to prove that they are the gender that they are identified through their behavior and actions. And so cisgendered individuals take it upon themselves to decide whether or not transgendered people pass adequately to be considered the sex of that they've decided that they are, or they believe that they are. And I don't mean to diminish that they are mentally.
That they identify with.
That they identify with. Okay, that's a microaggression. Then how is women saying to men, "You're not a real man," not a microaggression? Because it's exactly the same dynamic. That women are saying, "I am the one who determines whether or not you have a gender identity, and you have to abide by my standards and rules, or you don't get it. You don't get to have your chosen gender identity."
Well, for
How
that
is that
matter,
any different?
most of feminist things that feminists say about men would be microaggression. Saying that abuse is not the same when it happens to men at the hands of women as it is when it happens to women at the hands of men. Microaggression. By their definition, the most aggressive people out there, at least in terms of these microaggressions, are feminists.
Unfortunately not, because this definition, if you look at it, it involves somebody from a privileged position talking to somebody from a disprivileged position, and so therefore, because you have a white cisgendered straight man, right? He's privileged all around, and so you cannot commit a microaggression against him. He is privileged compared to everybody else.
Wouldn't that be something, though, if they actually did, if the men who experience frequent microaggressions at the hands of women on a daily college campus basis, if they started turning in these complaints? That would be pretty awesome. But I do find it fascinating that with as much, still Cold War ideology as is left over in a lot of media and even people's attitudes towards Russia and things like that, and the communism, of course, the big, great devil communism, that some of the actual bad things that happen during communism, which is one, telling on your neighbors, and two, censorship of thought and basically, and not even so much thought in this case, by extension thought, but literally a censorship of your word. Those two things are apparently now being championed by SJWs. So it's kind of ironic that two terrible things about communism that even communist people might agree were terrible about that time are now being actively asked for by SJWs on American soil. So it's kind of fascinating.
This is actually, thinking about this, this is one of the most entitled, prissy, girly-ass things that feminists do. And it's really a means of projecting their internal responses as the definition of other people's intent. And I mean, they do that with everything. They do that with anything to do with sex. They do that with anything to do with political speech. But this is like, I don't know, for those who grew up with siblings and you had the sibling fights and everything, where you might poke at your sibling and yell, "I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you." Those are things that you learn to deal with growing up, that you maybe don't like everything that everybody else does. And even sometimes people do things specifically for the purpose of antagonizing you, or specifically for the purpose of getting a rise out of you. And when you grow up with siblings, you're supposed to learn that you don't have to respond. You don't have to react to that. And you can actually overcome or ignore or rise above that and get on with your life and say, "Oh, you have no power over me. You can't get what you want." Here we have this actual organized effort to dictate everything that goes on around the individual based on the individual's internal response to it, and actually drag, well, it's not really legal power, it's a school power, but on the university campus, that is sort of a version of legal power into it, and give yourself the right to enforce your internal response and the wishes you have related to that on everybody else around you. How entitled can you get? This is like serious privileged princess shit.
Yeah, I would agree. And this is an interesting situation because you did have these people that were like, "Oh, well, they didn't, it's not intentional, so we certainly can't punish all of it or do this all with the intention to punish." But they're like, "Oh, well, we would like to have some demographics on who is getting harassed," and so like, well, if you don't consider men being harassed, how are you really going to get the true demographics of what's really taking place here? And the thing about it is since these are guys, they're probably going to be less likely to consider what's happening to them to be microaggressions, and they'll just accept it. So of course the demographics are going to be nothing but these privileged princess motherfuckers going on about the male gaze, and somebody asked your number or for your number or something, or gave you their number, or just did any regular college thing that you do as a young person in college and interpreted it as something aggressive or some kind of form of subtle sexism. But that's just the ridiculousness of this.
Well, what I find interesting, especially in light of of Anna's comments about the sort of communist dictatorships and the encouragement of ratting out your neighbors and essentially like informing on people and going and telling. And you know, you look at it and what was sort of the norm when I was a kid and prior to that was little boys were expected to deal with that kind of stuff. They were expected to, you know, they might go and tell their parents that they have a problem with a bully or they have a problem with somebody, and then their dad usually would give them advice on how you yourself can deal with that, right? Whereas girls were consistently encouraged to go tell, to have an adult intervene, right? Have an adult intervene. And this is what I've been noticing so much more as far as now that, you know, my kids, my oldest is 20 and my youngest is 12, and what they were encouraged to do in school, both my boys and my girl, was all of them were never encouraged to handle conflict on their own. If there was ever a conflict between them and another student, they were encouraged to go tell and get an adult to come and handle it for them, right? And so we have cultivated this culture of kids who have never learned how to resolve conflicts on their own. They have always, always, always been encouraged, both the boys and the girls, to go and tell an authority, an institution, and have the institution sort it out for them, right? And that is quintessentially it's a feminine style of conflict resolution. Proxy authority, proxy violence, proxy coercion, you know, getting other people to engage in your aggression on your behalf, all of those things that we associate with women's greater tendency to levy false accusations, women's greater tendency to report when they've been assaulted, rather than just sort of hitting back on their own, right, or just, you know, engaging in self-defense on the spot, and women's greater tendency to ask for help to resolve their problems, right? So you sort of look at this whole thing now with having an anonymous system to report microaggressions, right? And it's not even a system where you have to own what you're saying. You don't have to own it. You don't have to back it up. You don't have to put your name on it. You just go and you report somebody who said something mean and made you feel bad, and the institution, the authorities, will take care of it for you. And it's just, this is so leaning towards not necessarily a female style of doing things, but a female child style of doing things. This is what we told our 5-year-olds and our 6-year-old girls to do in the 1970s, right? This is not what we told our adult girls or our women to do in the 1970s, right? We're just regressing into childhood. We're regressing to the point where not only are we treating and expecting no better of women than we would of 5-year-old girls, but we're actually coercing young men to conform to that model. It's bizarre to me. And nobody who's in university right now ever fucking had the opportunity to learn at school how to resolve differences with somebody on the playground without an adult stepping in and laying down the law.
I want to add a bit to that. I always like to bring in a different point of view. When we look at what this situation is actually depriving women of, it's a sense of relying on yourself to deal with personal conflict, to be diplomatic, to set appropriate boundaries, and be able to know when to relax those boundaries and when they need to hold firm. It's a lack of teaching women to be self-reliant. And it creates essentially an eternal slave class. Now, it's a very pampered slave class, but a slave class nonetheless, because they are continually reliant on the production of safe spaces and outside authorities to make those safe spaces. And this is, like you were hinting at, Karen, this is ruining women. This is ruining female adulthood.
Well, but it's ruining men too. It's
no, but I'm offering the counterpoint and looking at this situation in terms of how it harms women, and that's how it harms women.
Of course, but here's the thing. It's not just and here the real thing is that we cannot run a society. Like, who's going to be in authority? In 10 years or 15 years, right? Who's going to be? It's going to be someone from this generation that never learned how to resolve conflicts, that never learned how to handle anything on their own, neither the boys nor the girls, right? Because the boys were crammed into this stunted female child model of how to resolve conflicts and differences and problems, right? Always go to an adult. Well, eventually all the adults who actually know how to be adults will retire. And what are we going to be left with?
We're going to be left with infantilized women and feminized, infantilized men. And to be perfectly honest,
people who were trained by human resources programs, that's what we're going to be left with.
And you know what's interesting, though, because all the things that Allison just described, and I am going to move on to the next news item, but all the things that Allison just described, that these things that these women are not going to be equipped with, those are leadership skills. Being able to handle conflict. They're always talking about, a woman who's called bossy has leadership skills. No, she doesn't.
She's just a cunt.
No, yeah.
She's just being a cunt.
Exactly, and these people don't even fucking understand what leadership means. They don't understand how that works. But I will move on to the next topic. So here we go. And this one is going to be a little infuriating for you guys, so brace yourselves. And this is only proposed, this hasn't gone through yet, so before you guys freak out. But Northeast colleges may further infringe upon due process. Proposed college policy changes in New York and Connecticut would legally presume the guilt of anyone accused of rape. Their proposal would impose the affirmative consent standard, but would also add a victim-survivor Bill of Rights that removes all phrasing to suggest that the accused may be innocent. The concept of innocent until proven guilty would be tossed aside in favor of this proposal that doesn't even clearly define informed, unambiguous consent. In addition to this, the Victim Bill of Rights would remove access to important information pertaining to the case, such as the victim's prior sexual history and any history of mental illness, which would make it difficult to prosecute women with a long history of false allegations or attention-seeking behavior. It would also make it difficult to levy charges against schools for mishandling these cases. One can only hope that these lawmakers will change their minds. But, yeah. And this is, it's very disturbing, to be perfectly honest, this Student Bill of Rights that they're trying to push forward.
What about any safeguards at all whatsoever in the slightest
No.
for false accusation?
No. I mean, it basically.
Well, that's
anybody.
circus. That's madness. Because in fact, what needs to happen as a form of social revolt on that campus, if people are really serious about their rights, is absolutely everybody needs to file a rape accusation on everybody else.
Yes.
At once.
Particularly against the women on campus.
Yeah, definitely. And honestly, that it's not enacted yet, that really doesn't mean jack, because the Dear Colleague letter was once not enacted yet, and the Campus Save Act was once not enacted yet, and the affirmative consent law was once not enacted yet. All of these things are things that feminists will push, and they do the same thing to get their ideology enacted into law that unions do to get in place in a business. They bring the vote, over and over and over and over again. And then once it's in place, there is never another vote on that topic again. And
Yeah.
that is what happens with this. They will bring it up for vote over and over and over again until it is enacted. And the only way to kill that is for the students themselves to rise up repeatedly and not just say we don't want this, but tell the feminists, we don't want you. We don't want your ideology. We don't want you controlling our interaction. We don't want you taking over our campus. We don't want you dictating our behavior and our lives and talking over us and taking control. We don't want you. Get out. That is what's going to happen before this stops. And they'll be lucky if it does then, because that is how these people get their things done.
Well, one of the biggest problems with that too, though, is, I mean, like, as we saw with the satanic child abuse daycare scandals in the 80s and the 90s, which even as I was watching them on TV as, you know, a preteen and a teenager, I was just completely dumbfounded how anybody could buy this. Like, what? How can anybody believe this, let alone, you know, people who've been to university for 4 or 6 or 8 years, who are prosecutors and judges and, you know, and social workers and counselors and psychiatrists and all of this stuff, right? How can anybody, but here's the thing, right? We look back at that now and we look at it like we look at the Salem witch trials, which is, you know, it was a hysteria. It was completely irrational. There was no basis for it. In fact, it was sort of an episode of mass hysteria that was sort of propelled by a ravenous media that felt that the more salacious something was, the more confidently you would assert that it had happened, right, rather than questioning it, right? And one of the things, even though we look at it in that way, when it comes to pedophilia, we never went back to baseline. We never went back to the mindset that we had before that. We're now a couple, not like when I was a kid, right, before all of that happened, right, you know, you had your stranger danger education, and, you know, you don't take candies from strangers, and you don't, you know, go with the guy who asks you to help him to find his lost puppy and invites you into his van to go look for it, right? But at the same time, you didn't have dads taking pictures of their kids at the mall being stopped by security because somebody reported them for suspicious behavior, right? You didn't have, you know, grandfathers being booted out of bookstores when they're shopping for kids' books for their grandchildren because, oh my goodness, it's a lone, you know, older man in the children's section of a bookstore or a library.
Meanwhile, they take their children to church every Sunday.
Yeah, well, you know, but you absolutely did not have those things happening, and you certainly didn't have men driving by, you know, slowing down, driving by a 2-year-old in a diaper and nothing else, you know, toddling down a country road all by herself, right? And think about, maybe I should stop because there's something wrong here, but then decide, I don't think I can stop and help that child because if I actually do that, I'm going to be accused of being a sexual predator, right? So, you know, like, our thermostat was set 10 degrees higher when it comes to pedophilia, or 10 degrees lower when it comes to being aware of pedophilia and being suspicious of men after that whole freaking debacle occurred, right? We never went back to where we were before, right? And this is the thing that I fear most with this whole campus rape bullshit, is that even if it's shown to be complete fucking utter bunk, which I think it will be eventually, right?
It already has.
But if the majority of the population is prepared to actually say, what the fuck were we thinking? Okay, that's what I'm saying.
You mean
right?
legally bunk?
Yeah, well, but if the majority of the population is prepared to say, what were we thinking when we brought in all of these measures and these crazy laws, right? We're still not going to go back to baseline. We're still not going to go back to the way things were before all of this shit happened.
The one thing I want to add to this is that it's going to affect men more than it affects women. Just like you were talking about with the pedo hysteria thing, um, we did change where the bar was set on that, but it was mainly for men.
Yes,
Women
always.
are still, in fact, when women shouldn't be above suspicion, they
They are.
still are treated as if they're above suspicion. And so what I'm seeing with this, and this is the same thing, men are targeted with this. So
Mhm.
that's the only thing I wanted to say about that is we may be we're moving the bar, we're moving it in a bad direction, and
Oh
we're
yeah.
moving it strictly for men.
Oh yeah, no, the very fact that a 32-year-old teacher could say this 15-year-old boy raped me, and that's how the sexual relationship occurred, right? He raped me because he emotionally and psychologically manipulated me into a sexual relationship. And the very fact that she could say that and actually think that it would be a viable defense tells you where we are when it comes to holding women accountable for their bad behavior, right?
Yeah.
And it really is men who are penalized over and over and over. Women seem to go back to, just as innocent as they were before. And if they aren't innocent, a dastardly man is the one who led them astray, right?
And then you
Okay,
wonder
I
why
wanted
they
to.
have the victim rhetoric, though. That's why, because I mean that this totally explains it. Because anytime they actually do something bad, they can fall back on the victimhood ideology and say that they were actually taken advantage of somehow, and so all of their bad
I'm
behavior completely
inferior.
slides off.
I'm inferior. I'm incapable. I'm a
That's what
child.
it is. I'm incompetent.
I'm incompetent. Yeah.
It's like Bill Burr said, right? There are no feminists in a house fire. Like she could have the butch haircut and everything. As soon as the fire breaks out and the firemen arrive and they can only
I'm
make one of you,
incompetent.
she twists her little hairs into pigtails and she says, "I'm just a girl. I want to jump rope," right?
Yeah.
Because like they fall like and you know I
Okay, Karen, I'm gonna interrupt you
hard to
because,
blame women for taking advantage of something that's so easy to take advantage of.
well,
It,
it's not hard to blame them. I blame them. Well, I don't blame them. Well, yeah, maybe I do blame
I
them.
do too, but
Don't do that. Don't do that. Stop doing it. You're denying yourself and you're denying the rest of the society, and you're an asshole. So stop it. But I wanted to say that directly on the topic, we had to have seen this coming when Brown Miller wrote Against Our Will,
yes,
because she directly compared the lynching, like Emmett Till, who was lynched
for
for
whistling.
whistling at a white woman, and how the proceeding progressed, is most people don't realize this, is she ran after him with a gun, and then she got her husband and her brother to finish the job. So she started it. She started the violence, and they finished it. And he ended up in a river, and I think he was, what, I don't know, 15, 16?
Yeah, and
This black kid gets
he
Well,
was
a
he was
tiny little side note, actually, scientifically, black people are shown to seem by about 5 years older. So it's actually a lot of times children, like 12, 15-year-olds, end up being victims of some brutal action, and partially due to that because people like
they perceive
record it
them as
as,
older as they are.
yeah, like a 20-year-old male, but no, he's actually like 12 or 15.
Well, regardless,
Yeah, anyway.
this kid ended up in a river, dead in a river, because some white woman got upset being whistled at. And then Brown Miller, to compound this,
What year are
Brown
we
Miller,
living in? What year is this?
it was in, I don't remember, the 60s. Brown Miller wrote a book called Against Their Will and made a direct comparison between what Emmett Till supposedly did, whistling at this white woman, and the overall arcing structure of what men's ownership of women's sexuality.
Yeah,
And she made the direct connection between those two.
She
Lynching.
essentially said that because he felt entitled to whistle at her, this meant that women's bodies were considered public property, right? Even though the mere act of whistling at a woman could get a man killed, the cultural zeitgeist at the time apparently was that women's bodies were public property.
No, but it still is that way. They still consider that all men somehow
Need to gouge their eyes out.
or
right?
no, they're participants in a culture that considers women's bodies men's property. Feminists still believe this. But what I was getting at is that this resulted in a lynching.
Yes.
Like, this resulted in a dead boy. This is not offensive to feminists. They have no problem with lynching as such. They have a problem with only black men being lynched. All men should be lynched. That's their progressive attitude, and that's what they're putting into law in this. No, make no mistake. This is trying to take the law and make it into a lynch mob.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
No, I absolutely agree. It's you know, it really is sort of the devolution of the criminal justice system and the grievance system, any kind of redress of grievance, boiled down to a woman's pointed finger, meaning a man gets punished, and that the accusation equals the conviction, and the punishment is to be meted out swiftly. You even look at this with the new guidelines under the OCR, the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights, through the Dear Colleague letter and subsequent directives, that everything needs to be done in a prompt and timely manner, and the evidence doesn't actually matter. There is no discovery. That, you know, if he has text messages, Facebook posts, if he has, you know, any kind of evidence proving his or demonstrating his innocence, that can be dismissed out of hand as irrelevant. It's not pertinent. And you look at the instruction manual, and I think Hannah has it, and I would love to get a copy of that, Hannah, if you would email that to me. The instruction, the training manual for the people at one specific university, I'm not sure how many others, on how to adjudicate some of these cases, where it says that if a man is calm, logical, and persuasive, that's often a sign of his guilt, but if he's nervous and upset and angry, then that's also a sign of his guilt, right? So no matter how a man behaves, it's a potential sign of his guilt. And there is no way for a man to behave that isn't a sign of his guilt. And, you know, like, it really is absolutely freaking obscene to me, particularly in, you know, in the case of Peter Yu, which he just lost his case, I think the other day. He lost he had sued his university for expelling him without due process, and oddly enough, the judge that completely, I mean, he's going to win on appeal, I'm sure, because some of the decisions she made were absolutely retarded and completely against normal jurisprudence and common sense. But the judge in that case that heard that case was actually appointed to the bench by Kirsten Gillibrand, who was one of the co-sponsors for the Yes Means Yes law, and she is one of the co-sponsors of the Campus Save Act, and she's an outspoken, you know, advocate for rape victims on campus and in the military, and she's the woman who says that, you know, two of my colleagues commented on my weight after I had a kid, and that's misogyny, right? You know, and men never get, male politicians, nobody ever comments on their appearance or makes fun of their appearance, right? Like she's got a freaking bug up her ass, a feminist bug up her ass that's like fucking 5 feet by 5 feet, right? And it's got to be really uncomfortable because she's really, really trying to adjust the entire world to comply with her worldview. And this particular judge that she proudly appointed to the bench, it was her first judicial appointment, just made one of the most bogus rulings on a lawsuit brought by a man who, from everything that I have seen, there is no way that he should have been found in violation of his school's sexual misconduct code.
Well, that's interesting. Well, we're going to move on to the next show topic. But thank you, Karen.
Sorry, I went off on a tangent, but
it's okay. It's actually important. It's good information. All right, who will you help? Oh God, who will you help is a new anti-sexual harassment campaign in Ontario, Canada. Well, it's pretty obvious who will be helped by such a campaign. The real question is, who won't be helped by it? Well, the site supporting the campaign suggests that you believe any and all survivors of sexual violence coming forward. The campaign also attributes sexual violence to misogyny, which makes it more than clear that they believe women are the primary victims of sexual violence and that men are always the perpetrators. Among the myths they cite concerning sexual violence, there is no mention of the greatest myth surrounding this kind of violence at all, the myth that sexual violence is gendered violence. So who won't you help with this campaign? Pretty much anyone whose experience of sexual violence differs from the narrative. You guys want to talk about this? You folks in Canada?
who will I help? Who will I help? Not that cunt premier from Ontario. I'm not interested in helping her. Actually, I have an idea for a counter-campaign, and the counter-campaign would essentially just post the exact same vignettes in that campaign, but have the main player in it say, this ad campaign is designed to make you suspicious of men. This ad campaign is designed to paint all men in a poor light. This ad campaign is designed to manipulate men's desire and instinct to protect women, right? And that's what I would do. That's what I absolutely would do that.
You know what? I think it does more than that. This ad campaign convinces you as a woman that you are in constant siege by the rest of by society and men. It puts you in a state of fear and panic. And I wouldn't be surprised if giving women this identity of victim, this identity of being acted upon, gives them, I don't know, maybe encourages them to buy more. I'm thinking, I know it might be conspiratorial, but I know that advertising does tend to like to exploit the lowest aspects of our psychology, and buying does give you a momentary sense of security. They do say that the people who are most likely to buy something are the ones in a state of agitation, as opposed to calm.
Well, that's why whenever K-Tel used to market their products on TV, late night TV, you know, call now, supplies are limited, right? You don't want to miss out on this by call now, right? But yeah, no, I think that's actually a valuable point too, right? Because and I don't know whether it's about selling things, at least not in the sort of the capitalist sense. I do know that cosmetics companies and weight loss companies and all kinds of other companies prey on women's insecurities about looking young and looking fit and all of those things.
Karen, here's where the circuit gets completed. The more that women feel like they require saving, the more they buy into that kind of benevolent sexism that they are weak and require saving, the more they focus on their physical looks. So the more the more you pump up the victim identity, the more a woman is compelled to focus on her physical appearance. So
I've got one better.
Go ahead.
They are buying something, absolutely. They're buying, they're buying the feminist narrative, but they're also buying the brand. Because to be perfectly honest, right now the way that feminism is being delivered to the masses is very different than it's being delivered to people in academia. It's very much being pushed out as this sort of cookie-cutter, kind of diluted version of feminism that's very easy to digest, and it's very fashionable, and anybody can be one, and you don't really have to do anything. You just have to believe in equality. That's what they're selling to people. That's really what they're doing. But the thing about it is eventually they find that it's not enough.
Yeah, but this isn't feminism. This is not feminism.
Paul or the other one, isn't that what they did for Christianity, where they suddenly were like, hey, all of you,
Yeah, exactly.
what are they?
Yeah,
You can all
but
come in now.
this particular campaign is not a sales for feminism. What I'm saying is that it sells the victim identity for
Yes.
women, and I think there
Well,
might be a
yes, but, I
monetary
mean,
incentive to selling that to women because it encourages them to buy shit.
Well, I don't know that it encourages them to buy stuff. I think what it does, okay, at its root, and this is actually pertinent because it's a government-funded campaign. What it does at its root is it encourages people, both men and women, to be willing to grant government more power. It is exactly like the Twin Towers was what paved the way for the American government to be able to pass the Patriot Act. No American, the majority of Americans would never have stood for that before 9/11. They would never have stood for granting government that kind of power before 9/11, right? 9/11 struck fear into them, and then what did they do? They said, yes, yes, we'll give you this. We'll give you this power if you promise to keep us safe, right? And you have the government basically disseminating propaganda that makes women feel under siege, unsafe, insecure, like they can't trust men, particularly the men in their lives, the men closest to them, right? Because it's their friends, and it's their husbands, and it's their boyfriends, and it's their coworkers that they go out to lunch with. You know, it's these men that they see every day that they need to be terrified of, right? That are there waiting to prey on them, right? And here's
massive amount of feminist like hyper-feminist theory, and I was exposed to this, is that people who love you or people who are there in your life are there to take advantage of you somehow.
Yes.
So that's absolutely true.
Yes, all of it is, it's all exploitation. All of it. Marriage, motherhood, being someone's daughter, being a father's daughter, you're being exploited by your father. Being a mother of a son, your son is exploiting you. And if he's not exploiting you, according to Andrea Dworkin, he will only grow up to be the exploiter of another woman, right? So, I mean, like, you literally have this rhetoric being disseminated by government, this propaganda that makes women feel unsafe even around the men that they trust, right? And reminding them that they are unsafe at all times, right? And what they're buying, what they want those women to buy is the idea of giving government more power. That's what they want.
One of the things that I wanted to add onto this is that this is definitely, at least this campaign, is definitely from feminism. I mean, if you really want to look at it, I mean, I actually started looking into the basic summary of it, and they basically said all this violence, all this sexualized violence is caused by misogyny. That's exactly what the campaign was basically saying. You look under the fine print, and that's exactly what they were saying. And all the sexual, basically everything is structured so that it's, women are the only victims.
All roads lead to misogyny.
Exactly.
All roads lead to misogyny.
And that's what I'm talking about, is they are really buying feminism, because all of this stuff, what makes you think, what do you think really drives some of these coffee shop feminists into feminism? It's like, oh, well, I'm really afraid that, all these men are out there and they could be, looking at me with their male gaze or having weird, crazy intentions. It's this kind of fear. And they're well, who's going to protect me?
Well, actually, this is the thing. Feminism is a tool of manipulation. It's not just an ideology.
Yeah, but
it's not that this comes from feminism. It's that this employs feminism.
Oh, yes.
Well,
the distinction is that they are using this victim mentality as an attack on men to weaken the line between government control of every aspect of your everyday life and you personally as the individual.
Well,
and it is men that hold that line. Well, it is men who are independent and families who are independent and people who are willing to depend on themselves and cooperation with each other instead of their government for every little thing that holds that line. Feminism is being employed as an attack on that line. That doesn't mean this thing doesn't come from the government. Elitists within the government are just as prone to using that victim narrative in feminism as any other group of elitists that wants control over you in order to maintain their own power and privilege.
Yeah,
Well,
but I just want to say one thing. Everybody uses these narratives because they're convenient to us. And the fact is, if we want to make any change in this world, then we need to challenge our own use of these narratives, of these threat narratives. And we need to challenge, because in aggregate, the fact that we are so drawn to them is why any group of people develops power using them. And go ahead, Karen.
Well, what I think we need to do as well is to draw a distinction between the women who buy into feminism hook, line, and sinker, and you know, the ones who don't, who look at the sort of the age-old rhetoric, the stuff that I was taught in school, right? Women didn't have the vote; they were kept out of the franchise by a male-dominated system, blah 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 blah, right? That's what they were taught. They weren't shown anything different. They weren't shown a more nuanced picture, right? And so of course they believe it, right? But you look at the ones who, you know, those women who just they just believe that, you know, oh, women were once oppressed, but we aren't anymore, right? Those are emotionally healthy women, right? They may be ignorant, they may not actually know the whole story, but at least they're emotionally healthy enough to say, well, yeah, but that's not what things are like now. Right? But you look at the women that are most likely to be sucked into feminism, these are women who are already vulnerable. They have emotional problems. They suffer from depression. They suffer from anxiety disorders. They suffer from personality disorders. They suffer from all kinds of things, eating disorders. You know, like I can't even count the number of times when I have read a feminist article, right? And there is something really unresolved, that this person is really not happy with themselves. This person has all kinds of issues. They have, like, Katie J.M. Baker, I believe, from Jezebel, Katie Baker from Jezebel, who was like, when men started to notice me when I hit puberty, that was when I started overeating so I could make myself unattractive, right? So that men wouldn't notice me anymore. That's not a healthy way to be, right? It just isn't. It's just not a healthy way to go through puberty, is intentionally making yourself unattractive to the opposite sex to avoid men looking at you. And, you know, so, you know, or this woman who has an eating disorder, or, you know, or this woman who has admits she has bipolar, or she has a personality disorder, or whatever, right? I mean, so many of these women are vulnerable emotionally and psychologically, and that, I think, is they are the ones, and it's really upsetting to me how this particular form of manipulation that stymies women, it just keeps them stunted. It keeps them in a cage of imaginary and illusory fear, right? Of things that don't exist, or at least don't exist the way they believe they do. That these are the women that these kinds of campaigns are preying on primarily. These are the women who are going to be most hurt by it, are the ones who are already vulnerable. And I find that really sad.
I would agree. But I guess we should go to the final topic, unless anybody else has anything to say.
Don't ask them, just do it.
Okay, don't ask, just do. But I haven't asked for their consent, Allison. That's rape. Rape is wrong.
Try it. This is good. It's good goddamn moderating. I mean, you ask for consent constantly.
I know.
They'll just get annoyed. The audience will get annoyed.
Censorship Club is you don't talk about Censorship Club.
Okay. Okay, gosh, this is a piece written by Ku. All right. I don't know much about this, but I will read this. The Spanish Civil Guard, an FBI equivalent for Spain, established a rare and refreshing tweet in which they asked people to report cases of domestic violence for both women and men. The tweet stated, quote, tolerance zero against domestic violence in all its forms, unquote, and was accompanied by a double poster of a man and a woman that said, on the left, if you abuse a woman, you stop being a man. Against abuse, zero tolerance. And on the right, if you abuse a man, you stop being a woman. That's interesting. The Civil Guard Twitter, it was then assaulted by tons of offended feminists demanding that the tweet be deleted under the basis of sexism and dismissing violence against women. They also accused the Civil Guard of being against the wishes of their country because they took 18 hours to delete the tweet. Quote, that the Civil Guard insists and don't delete the tweet, that this is, I don't know how good
Oh wait, just a sec. Let me give this a try myself.
No, it's
I sometimes struggle with this.
It's not grammatically correct, but I can still read it.
If the Civil Guard Twitter was then assaulted by tons of offended feminists demanding that the tweet be deleted under the basis of sexism and diminishing violence against women. They also accused the Civil Guard of being against the wishes of their country because they took 18 hours to delete the tweet. That the Civil Guard insist and didn't delete the tweet, that questions domestic violence is full of the worst ideology, said Carmen Montan, I butchered that, the Secretary for Equality for the PSOE, the main opposition of the actual PP government. So essentially they probably have an opposition and a primary government. To compare male chauvinist violence that hits and kills women with the mistreatment that some men can suffer, that's madness, said Eleno Valesino, president of the Commission for Human Rights. Valciano, okay. A hashtag called Retridia? Okay, a hashtag called Delete It Now was created to ask for the tweet to be deleted. Delete it now, the tweet that diminishes violence against women, said one tweet. They don't have shame or respect for the victims, said another feminist. Finally, the police had to delete the tweet and release a public apology, stating that their intention was for both kinds of crimes to be reported. But that didn't stop the offended. They also claimed that the Civil Guard had also made another tweet on February that said, it isn't to be tolerated to be insulted, abused, and mistreated, referring also to both men and women. So that essentially the Civil Guard had made a tweet that said, you shouldn't abuse men. The PSOE has officially asked for an investigation of the Civil Guard and declared that they want them to be educated in what domestic violence is. All I can say to this is thank you, feminists!
Equality!
Thank you!
Equality! Oh, the sweet, sweet equality.
Yeah, feminists want equal treatment, except when it involves equal accountability.
I know so many Spanish swear words that I could exchange.
Well, if you can pronounce
no.
hashtag, then
because this is just unfucking like every time you turn around, a feminist group is doing something like this, and and then the feminists the coffee shop feminists. So yeah, you're right. They don't know. Maybe they don't know. At this point, how can they say they don't know? And then when you tell them, their immediate thing is, not all feminism is like that. Well, I'm sorry, but if I were part of a group that did this, if I took the label, I'd be like, yeah, you know what? Sayonara. See you later. You people are fucked.
If it were true that not all feminism was like that, then when they learn about this shit, they would, A, oppose it actively, not just sit around and say, well, that's not us, wasn't me. Bobby threw the rock through your window, Mrs. Smith. I was clear out on second base. None of that shit would happen. But the other thing is they would stop repeating the statistics that are gathered by these feminists, by the feminists who are like that.
Actually,
the statistics that are created by biased research and manipulated information and the false claims that are made based on that, these coffee shop feminists would stop repeating that shit and start admitting that the shit's not true. But they don't. They still repeat the cost statistics. They still repeat the domestic violence statistics that claim the majority of domestic violence is perpetrated by men against women.
Oh, here's
Ignore.
the hilarious thing. Okay, because we were just talking last item about the Who Will You Help campaign.
Yeah.
Somebody on Reddit sent a letter to the Premier of Ontario, right? And he said he basically called her on the fact that he said, "I am a staunch supporter of eradicating sexual assault and promoting gender equality. This commercial, however, makes it seem that men are exclusively the perpetrators of sexual assault and gender-based violence. I recognize that statistically a higher amount of sexual assault crimes are reported as violence against women by men, but that does not discount the fact that male victims are being completely disregarded in the advertisement. This commercial generalizes public statistics to remove sexual violence against men completely and makes them seem solely as the aggressor. Please rectify this commercial immediately. Update it to have a fifth scenario where a man is the victim. If not, please remove it from the air." Right? The Premier's reply was as follows. "Thank you for taking the time to send your online message to me regarding Ontario's sexual violence and harassment action plan and the Who Will You Help campaign. I appreciate receiving your feedback on an issue that is of high priority to our government. I want to respond to your question about why male victims were not represented in the public awareness campaign. This is the first time that the province has embarked on a public education campaign to raise awareness of sexual violence and harassment. Our campaign is based on strong evidence that sexual assault is a gender-based crime most often perpetrated by men against women. 99% of sexual violence or sexual assault is committed by men, male on female. We know that men also experience sexual violence and have unique needs for support. That's why we fund the Support Services for Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse program, which provides specialized services, including counseling, peer support, and referrals to other appropriate community support services. The program is the first of its kind in Canada and is delivered by agencies across the province. For more information, blah, blah, blah." Through the Who Will You Help campaign, we want to challenge attitudes and help change behavior by inspiring open dialogue about what harmful behavior looks like and feels like, so that we can recognize it and intervene. If we can, as a society, have an open discussion, blah, 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 blah. Right? If we can make women safer, it will make men safer. Right? Okay, but here's the thing. 99% of sexual violence or sexual assault is committed by men, male on female. 99%. She literally pulled it out of her ass.
It's a quote that feminists use all the time, and
yeah, or 95% or 98%.
Yeah. But when what they're getting it from is, if you only look at sexual assault that involves penetrating a woman's vagina.
Yeah, sticking a penis in something. Yeah.
The majority of that is perpetrated by men. But if that you only find that statistic if you exclude other sexual assault, which is typical of the way feminists do research.
Yeah, but at the same time,
anything that does not support the statistics they want to create.
At the same time, okay, so they'll say 99% of sexual assault is perpetrated by men on women because rape, right? Sticking something in a woman's vagina, right? So all the victims are women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or wait, at least all the perpetrators are men. Sometimes a man can stick his cock in another man, right, without that man's consent, right? So 99% of the victims are women and 100% of the perpetrators are men, because sexual assault, according to this particular thing that they bandy around, requires a penis. Okay.
Or at least requires the perpetrator to penetrate, which is designed to exclude female perpetrators who have no reason to penetrate.
Yes. But at the same time, they want to include in the sexual assault statistics that demand society take action on behalf of, keeping women safe. They want those statistics to include things like attempted forced kissing.
Mm-hmm. But they don't want to admit that is something perpetrated.
And they don't think that okay, so a guy is at a club and a woman grabs his junk on the dance floor. That's not sexual assault, right? I actually read it was an NCHERM Brett Sokolow. It's the National Center for Higher Risk in Education Management, fucking blah blah blah, right? And he's the head of that, and he was sort of the architect of how college campuses in the U.S. handle sexual assault, right, and sexual misconduct. And in a handbook from NCERM, there was a scenario, right, between that was, is this actually sexual misconduct? And the scenario started out with Jane and John, and they go to a party, a frat party or whatever, and they're dancing and they're drinking, and and they're dancing, they're on the dance floor, and and then Jane starts to grind up against John, and then and John sort of puts his arms around Jane, and then Jane grabs his penis, right? And then they go upstairs, and then he pressures her into sex. She says no once or something like that, and he keeps asking, and then she acquiesces, right? And so he's guilty of sexual misconduct. But the very first overtures, the very first physical contact between the two was initiated by Jane. And in this scenario, it just seemed absolutely bizarre to me that in a handbook on sexual misconduct and acquiring consent for sexual activity, right, that they would actually write as an example a scenario where the woman grinds against the guy without his consent and grabs his junk without his consent, right? But he's the one guilty of sexual misconduct.
I'm not surprised by that. Feminists and social justice warriors take both, whether they call themselves feminists or not, which most social justice warriors do call themselves feminists also. They all have a narrative they promote. There's a type of circular reasoning behind this. They will claim that in order for something to be sexism, or in order for something to be racism, or in order for something to be harassment, or in order for something to be violence, it has to include an element of power. And then they claim that men have power and women don't, or they claim whichever victim class they want to promote at the moment has no power, and whichever perpetrator class they want to claim, or oppressor class they want to accuse at the moment has power.
Yes.
And their evidence for the claim that the oppressor class has power and therefore is guilty of the thing that they're accusing, whether it be harassment, whether it be sexual assault, whether it be racism or sexism or any other ism, that they'll use the statement that these people don't experience this behavior, this type of oppression at the same level as the supposed oppressed class. And their support for the claim that these people don't experience this type of oppression at the same level as the oppressed class is that, well, they're the ones with the power. So it goes back and forth around in this nice, lovely little circle. Oh, well, they're not. They're oppressors. They have the power, so therefore it doesn't mean the same when it happens to them. And well, of course we can say it doesn't mean when it the same when it happens to them. They don't experience it the same. Well, of course they don't experience it the same because they have power. They're the oppressors.
Well, what I find interesting is the whole rhetoric around patriarchy hurts men too, and the rhetoric behind feminists saying that that the reason men aren't taken seriously when they report domestic violence or sexual violence perpetrated, particularly perpetrated by a woman, is because they are perceived as privileged, and they're perceived as having power, and so they have to man up, they're expected to man up, and they're expected to just be able to handle it, blah, 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 right? But at the same time, they're unwilling to look beyond that, right? And say, because then they will say, well, it's impossible for you to actually be abused systemically, right? Or institutionally. It's impossible for you to be abused and discriminated against because you have power. Well, the fact that you are assumed to have power means that people can discriminate against you and abuse you with impunity, and no one will take you seriously, and we acknowledge that. But now you're telling us that you're being discriminated against and abused. We're not going to take you seriously because you're in power and you have power, and and so I mean it really does go around in circles, and it's sort of this self-fulfilling. There's no out. There's no way out for men in feminism, and this is actually why when I was at Kennesaw State, And that guy in the long red coat said, why won't you, shouldn't you be working with feminists? And I was like, I don't want feminists to touch any of this shit.
Yeah, well, they don't. I mean, I don't even think they advocate properly for women, and that's who they say they advocate for.
Yeah.
And I've looked throughout history, and the only thing that I would reasonably say is actually oppression of women is the feminist insistence on the victim identity, which I'm going to start calling the psychological lead burqa for women.
Oh,
that's what
yeah.
feminists. It's that freaking lead burqa that they want to get us all in. But I wanted to point some stuff out with the statistics, and we should probably get to the actual show topic because it's like
20 minutes left to go. And
yeah, I was like, we're probably going to go over, folks. So bear with us, bear with our various commuter trains and chutes and hatches. Yeah, okay. Anyway, so the statistics, the 99% statistics, are usually based on who reports to the police. Of course, if men don't realize that they can report to the police because they're never seen in any awareness campaigns, it's sort of hard to know how many male victims there actually are. And what's interesting is that the largest study in the States, the National Crime Victim Survey, has found that 38% of the victims of rape or sexual assault in 2012 on a national crime survey were men. This is not insignificant. That's not an insignificant population of victims. And no doubt a significant portion of those were raped by women because generally, if you're going to be raped, it's going to be by the opposite sex. That's generally how it works. So,
well, because generally people are heterosexual, yeah.
Yeah, or just that's the lines that we go down. But so and there's other evidence indicating there is a high rate of female on male sexual assault and abuse. And the appropriate answer is we do not know. If it's not, we should be treating male victims equally to female victims. It's we do not know, and thus should be treating male victims equally to female victims. Not constructing these shitty misogynist like this so-called misogyny paradigms and male privilege, and men have women's bodies are property of men and all this other crap.
Yeah, well, I would argue
anyway.
It's the opposite. Men's bodies are the property of women and everyone else.
Yeah, well, I mean, considering that they've had to abdicate their autonomy in order to even have citizen rights throughout all of history.
Considering how much more socially acceptable it is for anybody to put their hands on a man in any context.
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that these people are so willing to say any rape is too much rape. But the moment you mention that the victims are male, they're like, well, there's hardly any male victims of sexual assault. There's hardly any woman on male. They're so willing to sweep that under the rug. And that's...
Yeah, but of course they can say there's no male victims of sexual assault when they are defining sexual assault to exclude male victims.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. It's like feminist Mary Koss essentially defines it to exclude them.
Yeah,
and all of this chicanery.
If you define your research to exclude a demographic, of course you are not going in your research to find that demographic experience is the thing that you're researching.
Well, if the only kind of cancer that you define as cancer is testicular cancer, then no women are the victims, right?
Right. And it's the same thing as...
No men are victims of rape the way...
Yeah, just like they say men are not
the way
victims
no women
of
are
domestic
victims
violence.
of testicular cancer.
And when men are victims of domestic violence, they define it as, what do they say, preemptive self-defense. That women were hitting in preemptive self-defense. So they define domestic violence to exclude male victims of female perpetrators. And then they say, well, men don't experience it.
Oh God, I still remember the conversations. Like I had a friend, and she wasn't even she went through a women's studies course as part of her education, her program to become a teacher and to get her master's in education, and she tried to pull that shit on me, and it was a topic of conversation that we both had to agree that we would never, ever, ever discuss, because if we ever discussed it, we would not be able to remain friends.
Yeah.
right? Because this was what she was pulling. It was, oh well, she's just, it's her way of taking control over his violence. It's her way of essentially diffusing his violence before it builds up to the point where she could be in danger, in serious danger. So her instigating violence was a way of triggering him before he was, a way of letting off his steam before the boiler was going to blow up and take the whole family with it, right? That was the only explanation she could find to explain why a woman would follow a man from room to room in the house, throwing things at him and hitting him and pushing him into walls, and heavy things she was throwing at him from the sounds of it, and screaming at him while he begged her and begged her and begged her and begged her to stop.
See, I had a couple of friends that were like that, and she was almost 6 feet tall, and he was 5'7". She was an athlete, and he was a nerd, and that was one of those situations where everybody thought it was funny. I mean, here she is. She picks up a floor lamp, and like the kind that stands up face height, and throws it at him across the room, and people are laughing, and I'm like, this is not funny.
No.
This is crazy.
No, it's not.
As soon as a woman does it, nobody recognizes it as
And I would like to point something out. This is exactly that, just an exaggerated form of those traditional gender roles that feminists say that they fight against, except in every single instance where they actually support them. So take it away, Rachel.
Yeah, let's just go into. Well, I didn't actually write anything up, but I think we can actually just go into that from what we've been talking about. I mean.
Well, yeah, because we've essentially been talking about censorship.
Yeah, well, we have, and I think a good entrance into this is that, I remember that there was a time on the internet where you could find communities where you could just, you could say what you pleased and people just sort of policed themselves. But I mean, if you compare now and how heavily moderated most places are nowadays to then, I mean, I think you really start to see how we've changed our perspective on what should be said, if you can say certain things. And that's the thing. The internet has been, the last space left, in my opinion, for true, unrestricted freedom of speech. But the thing about it is that you've now limited it. They said, well, now you can't do that, so now you've got to go further and further into the shadowy parts of the web to be able to say how you really feel. And the thing about freedom of speech is that it's the thing that helps us keep the rest of the organizations that are at work, the government, anything, in check. Because we then have a place to speak. We can hold some sway over what happens in our lives. And whether or not that's an illusion, I guess as anybody is debatable, but I still think it's important. And as much as I might not like what everybody has to say, I still defend their ability to say it, because it defends my ability as well.
No, but before we get too far into this, I want to clarify something, because this is an argument that people get into all the time on social networking sites. As soon as somebody starts talking about censorship,
they're like, it's private property.
Well, no, it's not that. That people say that it's not censorship because the government's not doing it, or it's not censorship because they're not being prevented from saying something, they're just being prevented from saying it here. That's still censorship. And especially people who want to cite U.S. law, as if U.S. law is the law everywhere, because we're just the biggest. We have a lot more free speech rights in the United States than people have in many other nations. Yes. But it's based on something very, very simple. The First Amendment is not nearly as complicated as people make it, and it does not contain the word expression, and it also only guarantees non-interference from the government. The text of the First Amendment, I'm going to abridge it, I'm going to take out everything that is not about free speech. Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. Those are the things that relate to speech. The only other thing is that it talks about respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So it does not contain freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is not constitutionally protected. You are only constitutionally protected from government non-interference in your political speech, in your right to gather, to demonstrate, in your right to report, or in your right to petition the government. In other words, to lobby. That is constitutionally protected speech. And so if the government stops you from doing any of those things, that is a violation of your free speech rights. And that we see happen all the time. Congress does make laws abridging the freedom of speech, or Congress has made laws abridging the freedom specifically of political speech in the case of advertising and political campaigns. Congress has made laws and taken action against media. So these are things, I mean, the anti-monopoly laws technically are an abridgment of free speech rights. So these are things that do get infringed upon, and we have put up with those being infringed upon. On the other hand, censorship is merely the act of preventing speech from occurring. It doesn't matter whether it is government doing it or the owner of the website that you're trying to comment on. It's still censorship. It's just not government censorship, and it isn't necessarily a violation of your constitutional free speech rights in the United States. It may be a violation of laws in other countries, but it is not a violation of anything here. That does not make it wrong. Law does not decide what's right and wrong. Law simply decides what is or is not enforceable by government action, by police action, or by lawsuit, by civil suit, anything like that. It doesn't determine whether or not your behavior is shitty. And so this argument that it's not censorship if a particular forum only allows one viewpoint to be expressed, or if a group tries to force a company that their whole thing is expression to adopt a narrative as part of their expression. Arguing that either of those is not censorship because the government's not doing it, that's dishonest. It's not true. It's still censorship. It's just not necessarily legally actionable.
Well, okay, I would absolutely agree with that, but censorship is still censorship. It's still and here in Alberta, we have a small town called Taber, and Taber is a place where they grow corn, and Taber corn every spring is like something that we really look forward to at the grocery store and the farmers markets, because it's exceptionally sweet and wonderful corn on the cob. But they just recently instituted some bylaws and some enforcement of bylaws that, among other things, restrict groups of people that are 3 or more out in public. No swearing, no spitting, no all kinds of other stuff, and no hanging out in groups of more than 3. That's what's going on in Canada.
That's really weird. But I wanted to give this over to Cherry because she's been waiting patiently.
She has.
Sorry, I'm not used to having my mute button on the computer, so I instinctively went for the microphone, and then it was like, oh, never mind. So that's my bad. No, I don't know if this would qualify as censorship. I mean, I would like to think it's, I guess, censorship of thought in a sense. But I would like to talk about how feminists censor opinions about themselves and opinions about women in general. So not anything directly like, hey, you shitlords, you can't think this, but, well, I mean, sort of that, but also by censorship through neglect or lack of coverage, such as we saw in, like, the segue. We're talking about women who abuse men, yet people believe that basically doesn't happen. Like, right, rapes are 99% men do it, right? But we also see that women actually do it, but nobody almost knows about it. I feel like some people might genuinely, innocently believe that it doesn't happen because it just never reaches them. The information that does get reported here and there, and the facts exist that women do predate, it just never reached them because it's so suppressed. And we see that also happening a lot in the not NBA, but like whatever the female version. I don't support
WNBA.
Right. So in the female versions of a lot of sports, in soccer as well, they have athletes who have been involved in domestic violence, who have initiated the domestic violence, who have hurt their spouses, and they do not get any sanctions. There's absolutely no news coverage about it. While when we see male athletes do anything even remotely close to laying a finger on someone else or on their spouse, they're immediately kicked out of the NBA or whatever, and there's terrible sanctions and consequences. So there's this, and of course the banning of bossy, they're trying to do that, and so like more direct ways of censoring ideas about feminism, but also through the neglect of coverage. And so that's something I would like for us to, I guess, discuss at some point.
Well, I think it's not just a neglect of coverage. I mean, like, feminists are definitely guilty not just of neglect of coverage of those issues. They're guilty of actively suppressing the dissemination of those issues. I mean, just ask Marie Strauss and Suzanne Steinmetz and Richard Gellis and all kinds of Aaron Pizzey and all kinds of other researchers who have investigated Phil Cook, investigated abuse, domestic abuse, and sexual violence against men. They are bombarded with all kinds of hostility and threats and attempts at blacklisting. And I mean, Murray Strauss was publicly accused of beating his wife because he dared to publish research that did not kowtow to the Feminist Party line on domestic violence. That actually highlighted the fact that there were female perpetrators out there, and those female perpetrators weren't acting in preemptive self-defense. So, I mean, you essentially have feminists actively suppressing this information. But as far as it, like, one of the things that really bothers me about this whole thing is normally if you have an unexpected finding, and like my boyfriend, spent 3-4 years in research and development in engineering and electronics, and the guy that I dated previous to that was a research oncologist. And if you have an unexpected finding or an unexpected result, right, that's something normally in the world of normal academia, that's something to be excited about. That's, like, the guy I was dating who was a research oncologist, he was trying to find the link between cancer and obesity. And in his travels, researching that, he found a link between malnutrition and resistance to viruses. And this was an unexpected finding, and he published a paper on it, and everybody was very, very excited about it, and the whole bit, right? Because if you find something that you weren't expecting to find, right, that's something that generally the entire scientific community is going to get really excited about and really want to talk about and really want to follow up on the research and see if it's repeatable and see if they can reproduce the results, right? That's how it normally works. But with this particular thing, and there have been numerous studies that have been done that have found high rates of self-reports of female perpetration of sexual violence against men, anywhere from 15% to 40%, depending on the population and the survey methodology, of women who don't just say they would, but that they have engaged in sexually aggressive tactics in order to get sex out of an unwilling man, right? So, I mean, you have these findings that you wouldn't expect to find. Marie Strauss had these findings that you wouldn't expect to find, right? And what's the response of the community in charge of these issues, right? It's to suppress it, right, or to just be completely unexcited by it. Just to sort of, oh, they'll report it, it's an unexpected finding, and then it fizzles out. It's like Teflon, right? It's stuck for a second and then it slid right off, and now it's gone. It's gone from awareness, and nobody thinks about it anymore. And this is one of the things that I find most interesting about this, and sort of the biggest roadblock, I think, in all of this is that I don't think that the public sees it in their interest to really look at these findings, to really acknowledge that that these findings are valid, or maybe more accurately, to care about it. That John the Other wisely said years ago on the radio, when I was doing the radio with him, that the idea of compassion for men is Teflon coated, right? You can convince people for a second and then it just slides away. And you know, so you can literally have people acknowledge that, yes, this is out there. Yes, 43% of university-aged men say they were subjected to unwanted, non-consensual sexual experiences, and half of them say that that was intercourse. And 95% of them said that the perpetrator was female. This is college-age men. We're looking at twice the number, twice the percentage of what the Obama administration is claiming about women, right? And nobody, you know, people are like, oh, that's interesting, and then the whatever feeling they had about, oh, that's intriguing, it just goes away. They can't be, you can't coerce people to care about it, right? So it's very, very easy for feminists to suppress this kind of evidence, because people aren't really that interested in seeing it, right? Just ordinary, regular, run-of-the-mill people. They just don't get worked up about it. I mean, you say like 1 in 5 women is raped or a victim of rape or attempted rape in her lifetime, and everybody's up in arms. If you say, you know, 4 in 10 men are the victims of rape or attempted rape by the time they reach college, right? And people may actually say, well, I believe that, but that doesn't mean that they care.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And the thing about censorship, and it's going to continue on like this, and it's really unfortunate, because, you know, what, like I said before, when I was younger, there were a lot more venues for people to go to have a different opinion. And now if you have anything that is just the least bit unpopular, you can find yourself banned, you can find yourself reported, and now you can even be considered to be harassing. Like, the very act of criticism of something, disagreeing can be harassment now. So now you're not just somebody who's going to get a warning and maybe get a slap on the wrist and say, if you do it again, we're going to boot your ass out of here. It's, now you may be guilty of a crime. That's it's just completely ridiculous. It's
I found it astounding. Like, and this was a couple of years ago, back when Rizzle Dizzle was still going by the name Snake Plisskenist, and he did some video responses to those pesky dames, and they slapped him with. He did typical YouTube response videos where he would play a bit of their video and then he would respond to it, and then play a bit and then respond to it. And he was hit with violation of privacy complaints that those videos were removed, and you know, and he couldn't re-upload them under any form whatsoever, and the whole bit. And these were videos that these women had put up of their own volition, agreeing to YouTube's terms of service, and if Snake Plisskenist had chosen to point a video camera at his computer screen and record them that way, rather than downloading them, he would have been in the clear, right? But there was that loophole, right, that he downloaded them without permission rather than recording them in a shaky handheld video camera, blah, 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 right? But it was apparently a violation of their privacy, and these videos were brought down, and I thought to myself, at that point I was still quite hopeful, and I thought, these women are abusing YouTube's reporting process. It's so obvious that they're abusing it, to avoid being criticized, to avoid being embarrassed by having their own opinions being picked apart by somebody, and having an argument presented counter to their opinions. And this was back when I was still calling myself an egalitarian, because I thought that was actually remotely possible. And I thought, honestly, if the Streisand effect takes place and we really get the message out there that these women are absolutely abusing YouTube's reporting procedure, and they're abusing the institution that's put in place to actually protect people from abuse in order to abuse others, right? That they're going to actually have their channel come down. They're actually going to be penalized by YouTube. No, none of that happened, right? They were being bullies, and they were using an institution, right, a patriarchal institution, in order to do it, and they suffered no consequences whatsoever. And this is really what makes me sort of, I guess, not quite despair, but something close to it, is that it is so difficult to convince an institution to hold a woman accountable for that kind of egregious abuse. You look at Jackie and the University of Virginia gang rape hoax, and even the cop, the spokesman for the police, they did 5 months of investigation and came up with nothing. They could corroborate not a single element of what she told Rolling Stone, and they still are not willing to say she made it up. The cop still said, this doesn't mean we don't believe something bad didn't happen to Jackie that night. They still have to say that, right? Because if they don't, they're going to be punished.
Yeah, that's actually pretty fucking messed up.
Well, I would argue that we've actually been talking about censorship for most of the show.
We have.
The thing is that, okay, granted, Hillary's wage grab is a stretch, but microaggressions is another way of censoring people.
Yes,
it is.
Creating a climate where people can't talk, or where human speech is policed, so that people feel comfortable. Well, only certain people, because some people are expected to suck it up, and then those other people complain that the people who are expected to suck it up get the benefits.
Aren't interacting with them.
Or not just aren't interacting, but if you have a group of people that are always expected to suck it up, they get really good at sucking it up, and then sucking it up is surprisingly one massive component of any kind of achievement.
Well, sucking it up is also toxic masculinity, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but to an extent it isn't, because you can't really achieve anything unless you're willing to suck up a lot of negative emotional situations, because achieving stuff means going out and into the unknown, emotionally uncertain territory.
Yeah, well, I'm of the opinion that toxic masculinity is not really exactly toxic. So.
Yeah, but they complain simultaneously that they say that this group of people needs to suck it up, and then they complain when the group of people which they say needs to suck it up gets the benefits of being told to suck it up. It's the lovely circle of life. Anyway, but so microaggressions is also censorship. It's censoring people's interactions, and making, you can't even have like human interactions without somebody being able to police them. And infringement of due process rights was essentially censoring evidence in the legal system, which is probably some of the most scary censoring out there.
Yes.
And then we have the anti-sexual harassment campaign, which is censoring reality about harassment, sexual violence, and domestic abuse.
Yes.
To create an artificially inflated female victimhood. And finally, we have the Spanish Civil Guard being actually censored by feminists when they promote the reality that abuse isn't gendered and that men can be victims. Because God forbid we challenge, okay, feminists, it's traditional gender roles. God forbid we challenge the idea that men are defined by acting and women are defined by being acted upon by men. That's what you're doing. These are traditional gender roles. You just created a patina of a word that you can don like a skin and actually indulge in some of the most retrogressive, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal gender roles this side of the frickin' cave.
But it's progressive.
But it's progressive. No, it isn't. It isn't. You want to be progressive, then actually do the walk. If you're going to talk the talk, then do the walk. And challenge the roles.
Be the change you want to see.
Don't just expand upon them and make them worse.
What I thought was hilarious was the Ban Bossy campaign. Here you have like a whole bunch of women, right? You know, there's the Facebook CFO or COO, right? Chief Operating Officer, I believe she is, right? You have, famous actress. You have a famous music and acting star. You know, you have all of these highly, highly successful women all saying, "When I was a kid, I was called bossy." You have Hermione Granger, like freaking Emma Watson, saying, "When I was a kid, I was called bossy. And it was a soul crusher. It prevented me from succeeding, and that's why I'm rolling in millions of fucking dollars in cash."
Succeeding
And
is bossy.
everybody recognizes me when I talk, right? And I'm in charge of the operations of one of the biggest freaking corporations in the United States and
Not
in
to
the world.
mention that she played an extremely bossy character to get
Yeah,
herself to
She
fame.
did. But you know, here we are. We were all called bossy, and being called bossy is just a squasher. It's a squasher, according to them, right? Okay. And girls can't succeed if they're called bossy. We should ban the word, right? Even though the people who are saying that are all women who say they were called bossy and are in positions of extremely high status, financially, socially, economically, you know, like everything, right? Politically, the whole bit, right? And you know, like those are the women, and it stymies me. It stymies me because these are women who I have always sort of looked at as sort of being capable of doing what it takes to succeed, being capable of doing what it takes to achieve, right? And they're buying into the victim narrative. These women are not Margaret Thatcher. I wish they were. Right, and it's not because I like Margaret Thatcher's politics, right? Because I don't know enough about Margaret Thatcher's politics or UK politics to know whether I liked her politics. But what I do know is I did like her. I absolutely adored her. I adored her style. I adored the fact that she could cut a man in the opposition or a woman in the opposition down to a tiny little stub of a human being just with a few words during question period in Parliament, right? She was like the toughest bitch ever, right? And she said, feminism is poison, right? I owe nothing to the women's movement. Feminism is poison. My dad was a grocer, right? And I came up on my own, and I earned my way, right? And I overcame my obstacles, and here I am. This is me, right? And I didn't need the sisterhood to do it, right? And that is the attitude that's going to get you respect. It's not the attitude of a Senator Gillibrand who says, "Oh, my colleague called me fat, and that's misogyny." right? Like, I don't understand how even highly successful women, right? Highly successful women who arguably rose on their merits can buy into this fucking mentality. I don't get it. Like, don't they want to own their accomplishments? Don't they want to own their achievements and say, I did that. I did it. Not the sisterhood, not fucking feminism, not chivalry, right? Not any of that. That was me. That was all me being just as tough and capable and competent and ambitious as any fucking man, right?
Unfortunately,
That
it's
was all me.
not the social attitude that's going to make you any friends and allow the feminists to continue to keep you in power and support you. You have to bow to the horde and to the mass and
The
say,
board.
I am nothing without you. And because if you're too much of an individual, you get singled out, you get left behind.
Oh, and feminists fucking hate Margaret Thatcher. Oh, they absolutely, and they don't detest her for her politics. They don't. They detest her because she rejected them.
Well, they don't
Feminist
understand the difference
saves!
between leadership and being bossy. That's the problem. That's why they complain about getting called bossy, because they don't see what's wrong with it. They don't see that's not leadership. That's
Well,
just throwing your weight around.
well, and what gets me is they have no capacity to even examine the parallel male experience, because boys didn't get called bossy. They got called bullies
Yeah.
when they
Well,
behaved that way.
they don't want to examine the male experience. They don't want to admit that what happens that they're complaining about is not unique to them, because
Yeah,
then they
well,
can't play victim. You're not a victim if if everybody else had the same thing happen that happened to you. That's why you see feminists working so hard to shut out discussion about male experiences and to censor that.
And
Yeah.
this is the larger extent of censorship right here. You leave people uninformed. You have them hysterical because they've been misinformed, because you've censored all of this important information about women, about the nature of gender, about the nature of sexual assault. I mean, and that's the thing. These are important things. These are how people shape their worldview, and those things are missing because they won't allow these discussions to take place. If you try to start up that discussion, it gets quickly shut down. They'll call you a misogynist. They'll threaten your job. They'll threaten anything,
Yeah.
and it
Well,
might actually successfully take you out of your job.
and that's the insidious nature of I don't know whether you would want to call it irrational censorship, unjustifiable censorship, because like there is censorship that's justifiable. We don't put the word fuck in children's programs that play at 8 o'clock in the morning after the kindergartners go to kindergarten and the 3-year-olds are watching television, because we don't want them to say it over and over again later and have to listen to it, and we don't want to explain to them what it means. So there's censorship that is reasonable, but then there's censorship like this, which is used to manipulate thought, to prevent, and basically to support propaganda, to prevent people from actually developing a worldview, so that you can paint one into their psyche instead, and use that to have the power that you want and the control that you want, get the money that you want, and so on. It's very, very profitable to have that level of political control, and that's why we see the shaming language we see with feminism, and that's why they work so hard to make sure that shaming language only goes one way, because they're using censorship to promote their narrative. The thing I wanted to talk about when I put my name up earlier, though, is there was a bit of a discussion going on in chat about what is or is not censorship, and it's been a little while since it was up. Um, we had a lovely little spammer there for a while, and we all reported, and somebody said, well, is that not censorship too? Well, of course it is. But right back to the cuss words in kids shows thing. There is reasonable censorship, and then there is irrational or unreasonable or unjustified or malicious censorship. It's not malicious to prevent somebody from getting in your face and shoving useless crap in your face over and over and over again. It's censorship, but you're not violating somebody's rights.
We're
Nobody
talking
has the
about
right.
Manhood Academy,
Yeah.
aren't we?
Yes,
No,
yes,
why
we
are
are.
you giving
But
them
you know,
airplay?
at the same time, we have the same discussion. I've had the same discussion repeatedly on Reddit's men's rights, where commenters don't get the difference between saying that you can only say nice things about feminism in Reddit's R feminism, and saying that the men's rights subreddit is not to discuss underwater basket weaving, and which one is, they're both censorship. One is, this subreddit is about this topic, and we're discussing this topic here. Don't bring in some topic that is completely unrelated. But we're still willing to debate if you have an opinion that's counter to our opinion on this topic. Reddit's our feminism is a circle jerk. It is not a space for debate. It is not a space for open discussion, and the validity of the things that are said in the subreddit are directly related to that, because it is not a place for debate, because free thought does not take place in there. Every claim that is made, every piece of territory that is staked in that subreddit is doubtable, because it doesn't get subjected to any level of confirmation. It doesn't get subjected to any level of critique or criticism. It may be completely, out from left field. It may be completely false and ridiculous, but it doesn't get questioned and it doesn't get discussed. So there's your difference. It's not about whether or not censorship happens. It's about whether or not censorship has a legitimate reason for happening. And preventing criticism, preventing open thought, preventing people from forming their own opinions and coming up with their own conclusions about a topic is not a justifiable reason for censoring. It is a malicious reason for censoring. Preventing spam, preventing distraction from a purpose, which doesn't, when you do that and it is not a way of preventing people from coming to their own conclusions, preventing free thought, that's reasonable.
Well, okay, but hey, Hannah,
Mm-hmm.
you sound like a crybaby faggot who's hiding behind his mommy's keyboard.
Yes, I am. And my neck beard is totally making my chest itch.
We're all mother hens. All mother hens.
Like, honestly,
Okay. I'm gonna derail you there because I don't want you to say that. You're giving them airplay. I'm gonna.
How do you know what she was gonna say? That's censorship.
No, I could hear it. I could hear it in her brain.
What I was going to say is
censor the word.
I am not censoring them. I am not preventing them from speaking. I am just saying I don't want to talk to you, and you have no right to coerce me to talk to you. Freedom of speech also includes the right to not talk to people I don't want to talk to.
Okay, and I want to point something out along the lines of what Hannah is saying.
Well, real quick, before you do, I want to say what Karen just said directly relates to what we are doing at the con. The right to not be forced to say things we don't believe. And the right for artists to not be forced to say things that are not their opinions. That's it.
Anna.
Okay, alright, I'm going to finally get the floor, and I'm keeping it. I'm going to start growling here.
No. Oh, you
are. Alright. Censorship, you cannot censor a debate if one party doesn't want to actually debate. If what they want to do is yell invective at you and repeat phrases, that's not a debate. And if you allow them the floor and that's what they do and they keep doing that, everybody who's watching knows knows exactly what's going to happen and knows it's not censorship or censoring legitimate debate, because there is no legitimate. They're not coming to the floor with the concept of having legitimate debate. So how can you be censoring legitimate debate when that individual is not bringing it?
I just say it's not censorship because there's no law, there's no constitutional amendment that says that I have to talk to somebody that I don't want to talk to.
Yeah,
I
I
have the
want to
right.
differentiate between this, though, and the discussion on the blockbot. You have the right to not be approached and
Yes.
not be hassled when you've already, because you've already spanked the individual once. There's no
Yeah.
reason, and I mean that's not actually all that difficult. The individual is operating with only half a brain, but when it comes to the blockbot, what we have are social justice warriors asking for the right to say things to us, like to post into the hashtag Gamergate and not get answered. That is
Yes.
not the same thing as not wanting to be approached. Having the right to, they're demanding basically the right to have the last word by force.
Oh, the first, last, and only word.
And to decide who gets heard by other people and who has the right to associate with whom, because you have the Gamergate block bot actually blocks people for following other people, even
Yes.
if they are not tweeting anybody. So it isn't just a matter of stopping harassment, as they say it is. That is actually an effort to control the dialogue through censorship as well, and does not necessarily at all relate to the right to not be approached when you don't want to be approached after you've already had this discussion and ended it.
I actually do want to say I do want to actually clarify something, because I know that Manhood Academy is watching, because if the issue came up in chat, then I know that he's frothing at the mouth somewhere. If you want to have a written debate, written, right? Where neither of us can overtalk the other. So we're going to go back and forth the way I believe Paul Elam and Dave Futrell did over domestic violence um, for 3-4 years ago. If you want to have a debate with me in written form, where you write something and post it, and then I write something and post it in response, and then you write something and post it in response, I'm perfectly happy to do that. I'm not interested in going on your channel to debate you in a venue where you have control over the mute button. So just saying.
All right. Well, you've laid down the gauntlet. I think that is perfectly acceptable. Do you guys think? I think we've you know what, we said
Did
we
she
would
get
do
the
a show
gauntlet's
on
consent
censorship.
before she laid it? That sounds like gauntlet rape.
Well, I'd like to see more feminists debate Karen, to be honest, but they don't have the balls for it.
There's not a whole lot that do. I still haven't heard back from David Packman about the debate that he had set up between me and that women's history professor, that got as far as my opening statement, and then
Because you
her.
trigger someone, Karen.
Well, no, her it was actually a like, in her defense, she didn't chicken out. I believe she would have gone through with it, absolutely. She seemed to be very open to the conversation and the whole situation. But her setup was such that her voice was robotic, and she couldn't manage to get her. She restarted her computer twice, and we still couldn't get it to work. And there was a hideous echo, and she didn't have earbuds or headphones and the whole bit. So we'll see if she reschedules. Hopefully she will be able to do that, and we'll be able to get to that at some point in the future. But so I'm not going to hold it against her that she didn't want to debate. She was willing to actually sit down and do it, and it was technical difficulties that got in the way. And I am willing to absolutely give her credit for being willing to sit down and discuss things. So that being said, I've been told by a man who edits a philosophy magazine in the UK that there are several feminists he knows who appreciate and are fans of my work. And one of them is a women's studies professor. So I'm not sure what to make of that, other than maybe there are some sane feminists in there. And it's not all Jessica Valetti and Amanda Marcotte.
So
it sort of seems like a dolphin in among an entire tank
pot of
full
tuna.
sharks.
it's more like a circle jerk, basically.
Well, it's essentially, I think that maybe some feminists actually, like Christina Hoff Sommers and Kathy Young and Asha Show and Emily Yoffe and various other women who might be considered feminists or might consider themselves to be feminists, individualist feminists.
Well, it would have to be a circle jerk for sure, because there's this wave of feminism that I would almost agree with that was in like the 60s that had to do with freedom of sexual shaming for women and an acknowledgement that men and women are different, and I'm like, well, I'm 100% behind that. So I can see reasonable feminists that came out of that school of thinking, perhaps before Dworkin ruined it all.
Well, what I found really interesting is like when I was sitting down with Naomi Wolf on the panel in New Hampshire, she said that she came up through the sort of the classical liberal tradition of feminism, second wave feminism, blah, 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 the Enlightenment, all this, and all these great ideas that came out of second wave feminism. And then when I actually called her on some of the stuff that second wave feminists said and did, she said, oh, well, there were a lot of crazy ideas coming out of that time, right? And she also said a whole bunch of other contradictory things like the feminist lens is a useful tool of analysis, and then in the next breath said there are a million ways, there are a million feminisms and a million ways to be a feminist, right? So there are a million feminist lenses, like what? And also, she said, oh, well, we understand that men can be victims of domestic violence. That's why we don't call it wife beating anymore. And if I had been able to get a word in edgewise, I would have said, yeah, no, we call it violence against women now, right? But I wasn't able to interrupt her because she was even more able to carry on a conversation with herself than I am, which is saying something. So, yeah, but like essentially, there are some. One of the feminists that I admire from the second wave would be Karen DeCrow, who was the first person to successfully argue for legal paternal surrender in a court of law. She successfully argued that when women have the unilateral right to decide to become or not become parents when a pregnancy has occurred, they should not expect men to finance their unilateral decisions. And that decision was overturned on appeal, but she did successfully argue it in a lower court, and she was absolutely somebody to be admired in very, very many ways. And there are other feminists other people who call themselves feminists. I don't necessarily think of them in that way. That I have a fair amount of admiration for, women of principle. And yeah, so.
All right. I think this is a nice place
Release
to
the
end.
shilling.
Yes, I shall release the shill
Open the
kraken.
floodgates.
All right, I'm gonna also
Shilling.
mute Karen.
The
'cause you're
shilling isn't
echoing.
that 1/20th of a pound? A shilling?
Oh, Karen.
It's just a thing. It's a thing that I have to do. And I apologize. The echoing is bad again, Karen. So I muted you. Apparently it wasn't Anna. I thought it was Anna, but I falsely accused her. Yes, I think she's going to
Just in
speak.
case, though.
Oh, you bitch! You bitch! You falsely accused Anna.
I know.
Yes.
Anna,
I
I'm
falsely accused her of echoing.
Anna, I'm gonna hug you so hard when I see you in Calgary.
Excellent.
Right.
Oh, yeah?
So hard.
That's right. Our those of us who've been following along with our Stand Against Censorship fundraiser to have a physical presence in a geek space, and I guess fly the colors of Gamergate.
I will be
this is gonna
flying them
fun.
on my boobs.
Yes,
Yay!
Anna will be flying them on her boobs. I will be
Oh.
flying them on some part of the kiosk that I construct cleverly. So we're taking a physical stand against censorship in Calgary at the Calgary Comics and Entertainment Expo. And we have successfully funded both Hannah and Anna. So both of our palindromes are funded now. So did you want to say anything about that, Anna? Or Hannah? Well, you both could say something if you want, but Anna's the one that was most recently successfully funded, I think, yesterday. So, do you want to have a few words? Appreciation or shilling? You want to get some shilling on?
Definitely. I would like some shilling. I looked at the thingy, and yes, hugs all around, definitely. I will. I'm a hugger. I like hugs. Very excited about this whole situation, and this is my first time in Canadian land, which up to this point, wasn't quite sure if it wasn't just made up. So we'll have
You'll
to.
get used to the igloos. You'll get used to the igloos. Within like a few days,
Well, those are my distant relatives anyway, because like
it'll be
Russians,
just like normal houses.
they share. Yeah, I'm accustomed to it. I spent some time living in Russia, so like there's constantly winter there, and everybody rides bears. I'm assuming Canada is not that far different, especially since Palin can see Russia from her home, being in Alaska, Canada, all of that over there.
I would worry because, the bears can smell the menstruation, so be warned.
Well,
Oh God, no! Let's not start that topic. No.
I'm not a feminist. I don't have a
Censor
period.
that.
I don't
On top of
menstruate.
that,
I'm not a feminist.
Did you know that women cannot make mayonnaise when they're menstruating?
What the fuck?
The mayonnaise will split.
Okay, all right. One more time.
Real quick,
censor
so
that
the
comes
shilling
out.
thing.
This
I'm
is shilling,
super-
not disturbing.
Unless you count the shildo,
Super
which is
excited.
slightly disturbing. But no, we're all super excited. I myself, especially, because the Canada place is something If I could handle the cold more, I would totally move up there. But I probably can't, so I'm like going to be wearing 5 coats. And I have cosplays that are they're going to be happening, and they're going to be awesome. And you can see some of them on my page. And I'm also super excited about helping to get other people there, like Brian and Rachel, both of whom are fucking amazingly wonderful. And I can't wait to meet them in the flesh. And can you guys imagine the fun of conversing with both of them, all of us in person? I can't even. My brain's about to explode already. But anyway.
Don't forget the doctor. Don't forget the doctor. He's the
That
one who's
too.
tying it all together.
Oh man! And we're going to be having the purple greenness of all that goodness while
You gotta bring his
promoting
guitar.
non-censorship. And yeah,
Okay.
cons are a great place to come and talk and feel like amongst one of your own, especially a con that hasn't been overly ruined with SGWs. And we're there to take a stand to help to continue for it to be so, for cons to be left unmolested, at least hopefully in Canada. If PAX perished, hopefully they'll get rescued, but it might perish a sad death with banning of booth babes and things like that. So we're very much going to take a bodily stand against censorship with my body as well in fun cosplay. And yeah, it's going to be great. So do the thing. And you get rewards for donating too, not only the actual con experience, but like you get other stuff, which is awesome. And shildos are involved. Maybe not.
Maybe. No, still don't know. I don't know if it's a... Yeah. Yesterday I spent some time on Alibaba looking up the cost of quartz cocks. Interesting.
Not a joke. That's not an April Fool's joke, you guys.
Yes, no, I actually did that, but yeah, no.
Probably an interesting.
Yeah, well, it was a very interesting evening. I was thinking, wow, this must be how Rachel feels every day. Okay,
More than you know.
Oh my goodness.
Okay, so I was thinking when you said that social justice warriors are coming to cons, I think it's probably because they're like in their minds they see people feeling like having a sense of belonging and enjoying each other's company and feeling like they're part of a
Open
group.
and vulnerable and safe amongst each other. Yeah, it's a praying ground.
No. But it's like their antennae come up. It's like people have a sense of belonging. I need to destroy it. That's what I think is going on. But anyway, so yeah, if you guys want to help us out to get Rachel and Brian's next, then Rachel, please do consider donating to feedthebadger.com. We are really close to getting Brian. Well, not really close. So we're about halfway there to getting Brian, and after that it's Rachel, and it will be amazing to have everyone there and be able to talk to them in person. And you will, if you donate, we'll probably put up some highlights on our channel too. But if you donate, you'll get some special stuff as well.
Yes.
And I'm working with Anna to maybe do some special cosplay donation
Cosplay
rewards.
X for mystery.
Yeah,
Oh
Anna, as
my.
you've never seen her before, essentially. So,
Baking bread?
there you go. Baking bread, possibly.
I love to bake bread.
Making sandwiches.
Yeah.
I'll make
If
sandwiches.
Yeah,
you,
making
if you want to
sandwiches.
see an explicit video of Anna making a really hot sandwich
With
with
mayonnaise.
3 kinds of meat, 3 kinds of meat, and a homemade salad dressing that isn't mayo, but it's kind of like mayo.
If I was more evil, I would press for Karen tape of Dirty Talking, because this woman is fucking phenomenal at that stuff. She's like
Actually,
too good.
I would totally dirty talk. I would
So
totally
good.
actually read something that I've some filth that I've written in a sexy voice and put it out on the internet to get donations.
I think
Karen
people
fucking
would
nailed
prefer Gilbert Gottfried voice, actually.
I
I don't prefer anything Godfrey.
I could do Gilbert Gottfried, I could do Big Red, and I could do myself. I could totally
Oh
do
my.
it. It could be a threesome.
Or
It
you
could
could
be
just do a video of you making
totally-
a roast.
A totally
Just-
hot threesome. A
and
prime
just-
rib roast.
Yeah, make a
Oh,
roast.
yeah, no, I could-
and things like that.
I could narrate it. I could narrate that video about me putting
Making a
roast in.
Shoving that roast into that oven.
You have to,
Roast beef and
no.
onions.
Before you shove it in,
All right. This is
you
just
have to
getting-
leave it. You have to leave it begging in the fridge, air drying,
Overnight.
air
It has to
drying for
marinate
36
its
hours,
juices.
and
Oh,
then,
God.
and then after that, you have to rub it with the most beautiful seasonings you can think of, and then you delicately set it in the pan, and you shove
Now
it.
you're roasting
You
a
just
duck.
shove
Karen,
it.
Don't forget the
Shove
duck
it.
roasting recipe.
Butcher twine.
You need to do
Get the
this.
butcher twine out.
What?
A censored duck roasting
Butcher
recipe.
twine.
All right.
Butcher
done.
twine? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
You don't need
yeah,
butcher twine with a proper prime rib roast. You don't need any butcher.
I know, but you're the bondage.
No, I'm not into that. What are you, fucking a freak?
Okay, all right. You know what? Where I'm sitting, everybody's a freak. Wow, that was really good.
Well, see, now our imaginations are going out.
Okay. Yes, I know where you're in, and I'm trying to herd you with a stick towards something. Or perhaps, I'm trying to herd you with
A paddle?
Senor.
The blunt end of a hairbrush?
What? You know, I'm just
Nice
gonna,
wide one, made of
You know what?
bamboo.
A wooden
I
spoon.
honestly think that somebody's making
It's not made of bamboo.
about
It's actually
Allison.
made of plywood. Here.
Oh my
No.
god. What is
But
that?
Allison has like a magical girl, like from like an anime, and then she's got like a
Yay!
magical like
It's
crystal
back.
cock or something, and that's her powers.
The magical
Something.
crystal
No.
cock.
Well, they were saying that we should do like a side scroller, and this could be like a bonus, or no, a power
The
up.
stretch goal.
Yeah, me and Anna were talking about, or previous show we were talking about having the Shildo be a stretch goal.
Oddly enough, this is I think this is probably because my 12-year-old is watching.
You know, I think there's a little bit of dust on it. I think you need to clean it, Allison.
I think that's the first. That's
Baby
the first
wipes.
penis that he's seen
My baby wipes.
online that wasn't in a circumcision damage gallery. So, yeah.
Aww. That's sad.
So I'm.
You really brought it down.
Yeah, no, I did.
Way to make
I did.
it real, Karen.
Well,
Gosh.
okay. My 12-year-old, when I explained to him what circumcision was, he was just. I got halfway through explaining it, and he was like, "Oh my God, stop! Don't tell me anymore." And then I was looking up some images of from a gallery on, I think it's called Circumcision Harms gallery, and to post it somewhere, and he was looking at many images of fully erect adult male penises, some of them partially amputated, some of them with massive scarring, some of them with skin tags, with buried penis, with hairy shaft, with all kinds of meatal stenosis and all kinds of other complications. And yeah, he was quite taken aback and aghast at that. It actually makes me happy that he would consider that to be a completely alien thing and something that is just sort of, why would people do that?
Yeah, as a promoter of suggested practice, it needs definitely to be abandoned. But at the same time, men who are circumcised currently, at least can rejoice in the fact that society currently finds that beautiful and sexual.
I've been with men who are both circumcised, and my current boyfriend is circumcised.
Like, they can't change that they've already been through the circumcision, so it's like, why would we?
I'm he's happy with his penis, and I love that he's happy with his penis, and I'm happy with his penis because it's attached to him.
Pretty.
Damn it, Allison.
Thrusting your... All right.
Penis is pretty penis.
I just wanted to clarify something for the people in the chat. It's not a circumcised penis.
Right.
No, it's not. It looks a little bit like one because they all sort of look similar when they're erect.
Exactly.
It only looks like an aardvark when it's flat.
That's why that's my preference for penis, erect. Like, nothing else matters. It has to be just hard. Yeah.
Okay, guys. I think we're ending on a sort of a weirdly erotic.
Well, you know what? I'm going to.
You guys were the ones who brought up roast.
I got a good place to end this though, because I think that you guys need the fan artists who are watching the show right now. My pretties, fly, go and make pictures of Allison in like magical girl uniform or something like that, with the magical crystal cock, and that's her magical wand thing, okay? And then she fights the bad guys with her big crystal cock.
And
there we go.
Do some fan art of me with my magical bottomless wine bottle. and
I already did that, didn't I?
Well, no, it didn't appear to be bottomless to me, and also I was riding a missile down to the ground. I was gonna die. So how, even
nothing kills you.
Nothing kills me. Nothing at all.
You're the undead.
You're like
Nosferatu in a zombie or something.
I'll be sitting around after the apocalypse with the cockroaches going, "You want a Twinkie?" Because that's all we got. Shelf life of 1,000 years.
She's a Carinator.
That and maraschino cherries.
Those are delicious.
Yeah, and they stay good for like way longer than is.
And honey. Honey lasts a long time.
Physically plausible.
Okay, I'm gonna end this off with a final.
Everybody.
With honey and cherries.
Yeah, www.feedthebadger.com. And please do donate, because we want to get Rachel, and we want to get Brian there. And I know that Neff wants us to shill his comic as well, so I don't know exactly the link So
Oh, it's the, okay, I'm trying to remember what it's called. Shit, why is it on the tip of my tongue? Yeah, Neff. That's what it is.
Just post it in the comments.
Oh yeah, the devil's contract. There we go.
yeah, the Devil's Contract. But once again, if you want to see Rachel and Brian come to Calgary. It's
Once she has come,
Mhm.
you gotta
Karen will narrate it.
Oh my
We
God.
want to release them. Please come.
well, it certainly is.
Release them from their
It's quite a
bondage.
release, indeed.
Release
Does
them
that
from
mean
their
that we get to
bondage.
make a Monty Python reference?
Always.
We waste Brian!
We waste them.
We wish Brian. Okay. All right. Oh wait, I have the button. All right. Good night, everyone.